So as you get close to finishing up your retouching project, or perhaps you're just beginning it, we did want to just talk and walk through a few steps and things that will help you. So as you go through some things that we're going to be looking for, we're going to just walk through in this video. So this is actually a completed retouching project. It was a photo that was sent to us shortly after, a couple years after Hurricane Katrina. Somebody had a photo that they were trying to retouch and they didn't know much about Photoshop, so they reached out and asked for some edits to this photo so that it looked a little bit better than the damaged photo. So we do have a lot of layers going on, more than likely in your retouching project. As you work on it or as you finish it, you're going to notice that you should have a lot of layers. Okay, so probably a few adjustment layers. And you guys have been starting to learn things like, you know, layer visibility and level adjustment layers, etc. So I did want to walk through just a couple things. First of all, you do want to make sure all of your layers are named. We're usually not too strict about the adjustment layers because they kind of relate to what you're trying to do. But if you need to be more specific, just double click on it and make sure you name what they are supposed to be doing in your file so that you know what they are and that you understand how to name layers. As you go through, you're going to have usually a before layer and then possibly a retouching layer and sometimes a couple other layers inside of there as well. You do want to make sure you name them so they're specific to whatever you're trying to do. Now as you go through, you're going to work on projects that maybe have a couple layers or they could have 100 layers. And so understanding these layer visibilities are going to be very helpful to you. However, it's going to be also helpful to know how to hide and show different things in your layer, such as just showing one. So if you're on a Macintosh, it is Option click. And I'll have to look up that shortcut for PC. I can't say I memorize all PC options. But when you Option click a layer, it basically will keep the one layer visible and hide the rest of them. And then as you want to add through, you can just click on the eyeballs to gradually show you the rest. So this is the original image that was pretty damaged. There's a lot of water damage and some other, you know, dust and scratches and various things that happen to photos over the years. As we go through the next step, and this is one of those things that you may or may not see. Let's just go ahead and look in closely. There's a very slight paper texture blur that got added to this, so that we were able to, you know, reduce some of that texture. And you'll see some of the retouching actually happened on that layer. And usually if it happens on the same layer, it's a lot of the times because the paper texture started to get in the way. So the paper texture was applied to this specific one, and there's a smart filter here so you can actually see that that's just adding a little bit of a blur to the photo. And then the next one is the rest of the retouching. I wouldn't say the rest of it, but majority of it. And so you can see that we were able to correct just about everything close up. Now you're probably looking at this saying, well, you retouched the people, that's perfect. Well, what about the background? There is so much damage back here that you have a lot of decisions to make on retouching, and in some cases it might be, you know, moving pixels around and trying to clean it up. However, there's always going to be other solutions where you might be able to paint things or use gradients to help develop a background that is going to work somewhat similarly. So in this case, obviously we have some adjustment layers that helped us kind of play around with some of that, like some of the staining and some of the tonal problems that were in the photo. And then as we go through, you'll start to see different levels that basically darken and add some extra contrast, and basically it brings back in, like if you notice right in here, this is selectively bringing in some of that darkness and lightness into that photo. Okay, and we'll talk more about masking in another demonstration. And then this one is doing something similar where we're able to basically tie in a little bit more of those darker values. And then this last one is a technique that is very popular when you have a lot going on the outside, but you may not necessarily want to keep it. So a lot of the times if you have a photo that has somewhat of a solid color, it might work. In this photo, we just decided to try it out and see what happened. And we were able to create kind of like a vignette, and that's basically like a gradient, which we'll show you in another video how to do that. But basically we wanted to just talk you through making sure you understand you've got to keep all your layers in your files. You've got to make sure you understand how to control the visibility. So again, option clicking will allow you to see just one layer. And then the last thing is really we want to make sure we also understand that your file, even if you use like a black and white adjustment layer, or even if your photo is black and white to begin with, it's not really grayscale until you change it to image mode and then grayscale. Now when you do this, it may possibly say that it's going to discard things. We can go ahead and say OK. And let's see what happens. It's basically wanting to rasterize my smart filter. So smart filters are wonderful, but a lot of the times when you try to control different things in Photoshop, it does want to rasterize some of that. And then we'll just say, yes, we want to discard our color information. And then you do notice that it did kind of gray up some of that. And so we would want to go in and control some of this. What I would actually suggest before is actually flattening our photo before, if you notice that problem. So if you don't have any problems, keep your layers. If you do have problems, I would flatten your image first and save it as another version, and then just say image mode grayscale, and that should basically fix that problem, and then we don't have that happen. Okay, so flattening a layer or flattening your image is basically going to, and let me undo that. Let's go to our history real quick. So we're going to undo flattening the image. Flattening the image is basically going to take all of our layers and get rid of them. So you do want to change it to grayscale, but if you go through grayscale and you notice that it actually like negatively impacts the image, then I would suggest going through and choosing to flatten your image, and that's basically going to get rid of all of your editable layers. And then you're going to change it to grayscale. So you do want to save a version that is layered. We do need to see the layered file. But if for some reason the grayscale does act up like it did in this demo, you'll just want to save another version for me that is flattened. So we'll go ahead and flatten it one more time and then say image mode and grayscale. Okay, so from there we're going to basically talk about various ways that we're going to set our image up to be able to turn it in and stuff, but this is one of the biggest steps for you, is understanding that we do want to make sure we save all of our layers, and that one of the deliverables that you're going to turn in is a grayscale image, that we need to see that you do understand how to convert your image to grayscale.